Hi, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I am Natasha from Yarn Over, and in today's video tutorial we're going to talk about what tools and materials you will need to start making amigurumi. So this is the very first video of a series that I will be making on different things that you need for amigurumi, how to make amigurumi, the stuffing and all that stuff will come later on. But in today's video we're just going to talk about the first things you need to purchase when you want to start making amigurumi. So in this video we're going to talk about what yarn you would need, the crochet hooks you will have to buy, and some other tools that you need when you go to the yarn shop and when you want to start your amigurumi journey. So let's dive into it. So this is everything we're going to talk about in this video. First thing we're going to talk about is the yarn. So you need yarn to make amigurumi, and we're going to talk about the different textures of yarn and what would be the best for beginners. For beginners, like if you have never made amigurumi before, I would recommend getting the cotton yarn or the acrylic yarn because it is much easier to see the stitches and count your stitches. So if you make a mistake and you need to frog and take your project apart, it's much easier to see the stitches, especially when you are sewing as well and you need to sew the pieces together. It's much easier to take them apart if it wasn't sewed on correctly than using the other two types of yarn. So yarn that I would not recommend for a beginner. So if you are a complete beginner, you've never made amigurumi before, this is the first time you've ever tried to make one, I would not recommend getting yarn like this. It's the eyelash yarn and with the little hairs on it, or the velvet yarn like this one. It's not easy to see the stitches, and keeping tension is also a little bit difficult, especially if you're a beginner. And if you need to frog or you need to count your stitches, it's very hard to count your stitches with these two types of yarn because they're so soft and woolly. You can't really tell where the stitches are and where they are. Next we have our crochet hooks. So when wanting to make amigurumi with your crochet hook, you always need to go down a hook size that is recommended on your yarn. So when you have picked your yarn, you will see on the yarn label, it usually tells you what hook size you would need. But with amigurumi, you need a tighter tension. And to get a tight tension, you need to use a smaller hook that's recommended on the yarn. So this yarn is recommending a 3.5 or 4 millimeter. So if you have a tight tension, you can get away with using a 3.5 millimeter hook. But otherwise, if you're still a beginner and you have a very loose tension, I would recommend using a 3 millimeter or a 2.5 millimeter hook. So with amigurumi, all the rules are broken when it comes to using the correct hook size for the yarn that you bought, because you need to go down a size to have a tighter tension so that when you stuff your toy, the stuffing won't stick through the stitches that you've made. Talking about the crochet hooks, what crochet hooks I would recommend is not beginning with these tiny little metal hooks, because you have to have a tight tension, and with these hooks you have to grip them very hard and tightly to keep them in place. There's no handle to have a nice grip on them, so you need to grip them very tightly. This can cause pain and discomfort in your wrist and your fingers. So I would recommend using like the rubber handle one, or this one has like a perspex handle, or if you get the frill hooks, it's a little bit bigger. A bigger handle would be better for starting with amigurumi, especially when you are a true beginner and you still need to learn your tension. I would recommend one of these hooks. They are the best to work with and the easiest to hold onto and to keep your tension even. Next we have some stitch marker. So you can use anything for a stitch marker. You can use a bobby pin, you can use a safety needle, you can even use a strand of yarn. I use a strand of yarn to keep my stitches in place and to keep count. But it's very important to have some sort of stitch marker, because when making amigurumi you work in rounds and it's continuous rounds, so you're not going to know when you start and when you end it. So when you need to count your stitches to make sure that you have enough stitches on your round, you will not know where you began or where you ended. So it's very important to have a stitch marker. Like I said, I use a strand of yarn to keep track of my rounds, but you can use anything that will stay in place. So don't use something too short or too small that will fall out, because if you fall out then you will lose your rounds, and it will be difficult, especially if you're a beginner and you don't know how to count stitches or rounds. You will have a hard time finding the correct the right place where you started with your yarn project and how many rounds you have, how many stitches you have. Next, we have some darling needles or tapestry needles. I would recommend getting the metal ones because the plastic ones tend to bend easily, and it's very difficult to sew on a head or arms when using the plastic one because it doesn't bend always correctly into the right place. And when you're looking for tapestry needles, I would recommend trying to find these ones with a bended point. It just makes sewing so much easier. But otherwise, you can use just the normal metal tapestry or darning needles. And like I said, it's important to have the metal ones because when you start sewing on the pieces, you want to really bend that in and push that in hard. And sometimes with the stitches being tight, the plastic needle will break easily or will just bend, and it will be difficult to sew on the pieces with the plastic one. Then you need scissors to cut the yarn. You can use any scissors you have around the house, or you can buy one of these small little scissors that you get at the craft store. This one is for my needle felting, so I just use this one because it's nice and sharp and it's easier to cut the yarn with it. Next up, we have knitting needles. This knitting needle is just a tip and a trick that we use as amigurumi makers. We use this knitting needle to keep the head and the body in one place. So you can get yourself a pair of knitting needles, and what we do is we push it through the head into the body so that the head stays onto the body while you sew. It just makes sewing so much easier because you don't have to hold on to the head and the body and try to sew directly onto the body. So get yourself a pair of knitting needles. You can get these long ones or shorter ones, and you can even use them to attach the arms and the legs when keeping them in place when sewing on the limbs of the amigurumi. Next, you need some stuffing. So you can get stuffing at any craft market or yarn shop. I get mine from Baby's Wool Center. I collaborate with them, so that's why I order my stuffing from them. If you don't have stuffing or can't find stuffing in your yarn shop or craft stores, you can go to any Home Depot or home store where they sell cushions, and you use the stuffing that's inside of those cushions. Last but not least, safety eyes. So this is optional. You don't have to use safety eyes for your amigurumi, but you can get these safety eyes at Amazon, eBay, or some of the local yarn stores and craft stores might keep this. The pattern, depending on what pattern you use, they will sometimes recommend what size safety eyes you need to get. But my basic safety eyes is a 12 millimeter, 16 and 18 millimeter, and also a 14. So it's anything between 12 and 18 millimeters, depending on how big the amigurumi will be. So you get these packets of different sizes of eyes, these little boxes, or you can buy them loose, or you can get them in packets of 5 with just one size in them. So you get the plastic eye. This is the front of the eye, and then it pushes through the stitches. This little bar goes through the stitches, and then you put the washer on the back. So then you secure it that way. You get different safety eyes. You get one with the metal back, and this is the plastic rubber back. And depending on what brand you buy, it will depend on the safety eye as well. That's it for our very first video of how to make amigurumi. So in the next video, I will talk more about the different stitches that you get for amigurumi and how to use these tools and implement these tools in the video series that's coming soon. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can get more updates on the new videos that's coming for tips and tricks for making amigurumi. So thank you for joining in, and see you in the next video.